strategic objectives, so I'll quickly go through those. Zero waste to landfill in Nelson and Tasman, particularly reducing food waste and reducing building waste. Materials and their embodied energy are valued. Engage the community in understanding the issues, changing our practices and exploring new solutions. Engage with businesses and organisations in changing systems and taking responsibility for the full life cycle of what they create, i.e. product stewardship. And finally, lobby, support local and central government to implement change. So if that's you, let us know. Come and join our group. Thank you.
Joanna, I'm Julian Bishop. I'm with the Ecosystems and Biodiversity Group, and I'm not going to talk too much about the achievements in terms of the strategy, but a little bit of the achievements in terms of the group. We've had lots of Zooms. We've had several face-to-face meetings, including one at level 3, I think, where we all 2 meters apart and 5 of us in a space. Quite exciting at the time. We've got to know each other. We have shared a lot of ideas, and you'll hear about our strategy later, but we're up to version 6 of our strategy, and it's been a trimming exercise all the way, trying to trim down and focus, because we had such a lot of input, so that's been wonderful. One of the things that's come out of our discussions is a focus on blue carbon. Blue carbon is the ability of estuarine margins, salt marsh and estuarine wetlands to sequester carbon. And following that up, we talked with a dock expert in Wellington, and we have organised a meeting here in Heavenly Centre on the 28th of August, and there'll be 28th and 29th, and I think on the 29th it'll be sort of an open forum, and you'll all have an opportunity, if you're interested, to hear about blue carbon. So I'll be able to share that with you a bit later on. Thank you.
Kia ora, everyone. My name is Robin, and I'd like to thank Julie for helping get the urban development subgroup up and running again. We are working on a strategy. How would you like it if we had a local council in Tasman that was more responsive to our concerns with regards to climate change and other progressive issues? I have exciting news. We have an incredible opportunity to do something about this right now. We have been invited by the Local Government Commission to submit for empowered local boards to replace community boards, and to establish a local board in Richmond where we don't even have a community board yet. We'd be riding on the tailwind of Golden Bay, who have already applied. A local board has significantly more decision-making powers than community boards, and are required to reach agreement with the council each year on activities and services to be provided in the local area, and there's more. So please come to the action table, the long rectangular one out there, where we have more information and submission forms that Tasman residents can fill in. These are short, only 1 page, and easy. And if you fill it in here, we'll mail it directly for you. Deadline for submissions is Friday, August 14th. The more submissions we collect, the greater the chance of success with this. We'd appreciate your help. Come talk to us at the table. Yes, thank you.
Hello, I'm John Paul Coaching. I'm one of the co-coordinators of the folk now know that group is no, we're focus people. Co-focus people. Yes. The Society and Culture Group. which is an enormous, I mean, it just covers everything, doesn't it? And, like, climate change is cultural. So we had an early, we worked on the submission process early on. We ran a workshop for both the Tasman submissions and the Nelson submissions, and I think for us it was a real, just how much work that was. Anyway, so that was one of the early focuses that we were looking at that process. And we've got a core group of about 4 or 5 of us that are working on our strategy at the moment, and actually trying, because it's such a really big subject, trying to condense that into something that isn't covered by the other subgroups, and something that we can really get our teeth into with our current focus. So the next final forum will be submitting, well, will be presenting that. So if you want to get involved, please join us. It's an exciting time and an exciting group.
Hello, I'm Jessica, and I will speak on behalf of the land use and food fibre and forestry systems subgroups. So those are 2 separate groups, but we have a lot in common in terms of land use and the products that are coming off that land and the systems that are involved in production, transport, and consumption of food and fibre products. So we've been really lucky to have a really good group of people involved right from the beginning. It's quite a popular group. People are interested in where their food is coming from and the impact that has in relation to climate change. And obviously it's quite a contentious issue as well. You'll know that a lot of us here locally in Nelson, Tasman, we're here because of the beautiful landscapes that we have, and we want to protect those and also enhance those landscapes. So a lot of that's a lot of the big driver behind the work that we're doing, and also recognising that land use is a big contributor to climate change. So thinking about what ways can we as a group try and work with others, because I think we've realised that us in the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, we're not going to be able to do this alone. So we're focused as a group for the land use group in terms of what are other organisations doing, whether that's farmer organisations or forestry organisations, that are really looking to lift the bar in terms of best practice for how we can enhance our natural landscapes. And another thing, obviously, in terms of lifting the floor to make sure that there's not bad practices happening out there, is working with our councils as well to make sure that the regulatory systems are right and they are being enforced in a way that is both reducing emissions and also making sure that we're setting ourselves up to adapt to climate change. Because with land use, it's very much about there is a mitigation story and an adaptation one as well. So yeah, and I suppose we're conscious that as a group, a lot of the people involved are living in urban areas, and so we need to make sure that we're reaching out and extending and being inclusive of our rural community as well, and how best we go about doing that. So that's a key focus for us. Cool.
Good morning, team. Thanks all for being here tonight. I'm speaking on behalf of the Science, Technology and Research Group, who I have had the pleasure of focusing for. I have to give credit to the group. I barely deserve to anymore. Our members have done a great job of holding together. We're now still around 11 people, one of the middle to larger size groups within the forum. And we've poured a lot of work into the organisation within our group to allow us to work collaboratively towards our outputs, which I'll speak to in a second, and to outreach to other groups. Some of our members have done a lot of work on communication technology, which allows us to get together online and work on topics. And also the management of our group is now very much spread across. We have a rotation of those who convene and those who take minutes around our meetings. We've managed to hold a meeting almost every single week since the formation of the forum. Wow. So I'm pretty chuffed with that. We, as a group, are really proud of the outreach that we've achieved with other interests, other focus groups within the forum. I think we have a really multidisciplinary set of individuals with us. We got together with the focus of ensuring good information back to all of the heartfelt and experientially based work happening in the forum. And that's not to speak to the exclusion of all those who carry that within their own groups, but we wanted to make sure that from the science and technology point of view, that if there was an opportunity to provide extra information, or if you could identify a gap somewhere, we hope to support the other groups through bringing that deeper science data in. That's resulted in a series of information documents and speeches to the forum. And I'd like to tip a hat to our team as a whole, but specifically to Jack for driving this and some of his work on energy descent, which was our last main presentation, and some subsequent documents on that. Yeah, I think we would welcome anyone else in joining us if you share likewise an interest in chasing scientific data and information and making that palatable to the local community. Right now, we're very excited to be awaiting an announcement from SAPS New Zealand on a regional emissions evaluation, which we will be helping to run the forum. Thanks. Dolly.
Hello. So I'm from the Resilient Communities subgroup, and yeah, I kind of came in halfway through the lockdown period and took over. And yeah, we've been meeting. We're quite a small group. I've discovered through the process that I'm more of like an actions person, so I've kind of really ignored the strategic plan. And so if anyone out there wants to write that for me, I would be more than no. But yeah, so one of the actions that we have is we collaborated with Society and Culture, and we're going to be putting on a screening of Living the Change by Captain Films, and we're going to have 4 speakers. I think a couple of the speakers might be people who are part of the forum. Yeah, so if you want to stay up to date about that, just go on the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum Facebook page and click interested or attending, or book a ticket if you're really keen to go. But if you want to just stay up to date, we will be posting information on the Facebook page. Yeah, and then there's also a few other actions kind of going on in the background, and I hope that Julie got my email late last night, and yeah, great. So they should be out there, and if you need any other information, or if you want to join in on some cool things, then yeah, get in touch with me. Thank you.
Can you all tell us your names?
And my name is Anita Stevenson. Yeah, well, I had to check. All right, thanks guys.
Bruce Wilkinson, and this is Local Economy and Businesses. And we've got off to, I would say, a pretty modest start, but and you know, various reasons for that. A lot of businesses focusing on survival during the lockdown, and also a lot of focused in other aspects of their business, such as energy, transport, everything else. The successes I want to mention are the forum itself, and I think it's just absolutely extraordinary that having launched such a short time before the lockdown, that not only did it continue, but the momentum was building up. Sometimes the pace was terrifying. And the group I want to mention is Businesses for Climate Action, and now Katrina is over the back here. Yep. You can turn around, or maybe you'll know her. So she's part of that group, and then 3 others from that group made the presentation at the last Climate Hui mid-June. Their focus is on measurement of emissions, on the knowledge that you can't act on what you don't understand. So you need to measure, then you can manage. And so that's and I was delighted to be invited to join that group. They have some ambitious targets, and spoke about them last month anyway. In terms of from here forward, we do want to get more businesses involved. Now, some of them are holding back. I think at some stage we'll have a critical mass so that businesses will need to join to collaborate with others. And so we're looking forward to that happening. If anyone can think of businesses that they feel should be involved, please get in touch with me, Katrina, or anyone else in that group. Okay, thanks very much.
Everybody, I'm Jace with the Social Justice Group, and we have really had a fascinating experience in sort of re-visualization of what business as usual is going to look like once we have truly addressed the challenges that we have now. You'd have to say that our business climate and our governmental structure has led us to a precipice of viability, and we are going to take that over into a new model. And the ways that we make the decisions around that are very much important to the social justice group. And we've come up with some very good and I think productive directions for how to make decisions on a new business model. And then currently, we're now working on the visualization of how the sea level rise, the ramifications of sea level rise for our community, how we're going to divide up the responsibility of that, how we're going to protect those that are most affected and least able to perhaps respond to that, and how as a community we are going to come to address this. So if you're interested in a very fascinating, and I would say it's a rubber hits the road kind of an issue, come join us on the sea level rise consideration. I think you'll find it really fascinating.
Hi, I'm not used to talking into these things. My name is Verena Christine, and we represent the group for peace, conflict, and reconciliation. So what we've been doing really has been meeting quite a lot, getting to know each other over Zoom. We didn't know each other before. Leslie was our focus person. Leslie Aziz, probably a lot of you know, she left, like kind of on her way to leave the country, unfortunately. So we refinding our focus. Anyway, what we're about is really a look inward, a look at the values. We talked a lot about the values that we share, what is important for that transformative work that we're involved with, and how can that become part of the forum. So we looked at ways that, you know, for true change to happen, it's not just about what we're doing out there, but it's also what we're doing in here and what we're doing in the group and how we operate, how we look at the kind of ways we have been conditioned into being who we are and thinking how we are, and kind of what we have to reflect on to actually truly make a difference. So it's and that includes a whole bunch of stuff. It looks at all the ways that we have become who we are and become part of creating this reality that we all live in and now want to change. So so this is our work, and Tewehi has also been part of it. And we looked at kind of cultural integration, and you know how we can just how we can do things in a way that would really change things, that would change the paradigm, not just out there doing practical things, but from a much deeper level. So, and maybe you want to talk about our, we made a document as well.
Right, yes, but we don't have 20 copies. We only have, I think we're down to 9 now.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how we as a forum go about developing, well, deciding first of all whether we want to have a conflict resolution process for ourselves, for conflict arising within the forum, how we might go about deciding that we did want that and what it might look like. What we've done is we've prepared a document, a letter, for all subgroup coordinators.
It's a bit small.
It's very small.
all subgroup coordinators, asking you to take it to your subgroups and to asking if you can identify if there have been, let's hope there hasn't, but if there has been differences or conflicts within your group that you would be willing to discuss with us so that we can take that on board in terms of developing a conflict resolution strategy for the forum. So that 9 copies will be on whatever table out there they're supposed to be on. So it's first in, first served. Email me a copy. I'm going to ask everyone.
Yeah, because and as well, a lot of it is around how to create awareness. Conflict isn't just the conflict I have with somebody. Conflict is the conflict also inside of me. And conflict is the conflict with the societies that we live in and the way that we think and feel. It's a big subject. And if we want to change, there has to be an awareness created around those things. So we're offering just, it's a discussion paper. We're making some suggestions. We would like your input and we would like to carry on the work towards transformation. Thank you.
I'm Greg Cramack from Communications Group. You've probably dealt with me through organising Zoom meetings. But Communications Group originally started off both with a technical focus and a social focus. One of the things we wanted to do was have a half-hour radio program on the local radio station. Now, the reason I brought that up is because Julie has come up with the idea of splitting the group up into, it's still a no, isn't it? Social communications and technical communications. The main project of the technical communications at the moment is setting up the NING, which Leanne is proudly going ahead with, and he's the guy to talk to regarding that. But the whole idea of the NING is to provide an electronic collaborative work environment so that we're all not just working in our own little silos, that we're actually developing forum projects rather than each subgroup having little projects which sometimes conflict with other subgroup projects. We're trying to meld all the creativity of this forum into a unified workspace. And Liam's been doing great goings on that. And I thank him for that. And that's it for Communications Group.
The air, water and soil groups, 3 good groups that we thought was going to be a huge amount of interest in these groups. That hasn't come to pass at the moment. So what we've done is we've parked all 3 groups underneath the ecosystems and biodiversity group so that we can carry on in a timely manner. But that doesn't mean we're not interested in pursuing our these 3 really important groups. And I thought to myself, hey, I know all about soil. I can quickly write something up about that. And hence, I picked up a textbook on microbiology. Oh my goodness, we've learned a lot in the time I haven't been taking any interest in microbiology, and I learned I know nothing. So, if anyone wants a big challenge, they're welcome to come and see me and have a work with me on those individual groups, and we can get those all started again. Great. Cheers.
So I thought I'll just talk to you fellas about the Te Ao Māori and Whaitekatanga subgroup that does not exist anymore. About a month ago, I think we decided to expand the group. We always had issue with the fact that we were just one group amongst all the rest. As Māori and Whānau, we feel that our position doesn't sit there. But so we've managed to step up into the coordination group level. We are put energy and time in there. So our money can be weaved into the whole workings of everything rather than just on the side. So that was a big step for us, and it felt right for everyone. So that's where we are right now. And with that, I've been just thinking over when the best time is to do it, but now will be the time. I'm going to be stepping away as co-chair, and stepping away completely from the forum. I feel like that this is the right time to do it. We've got through a lot of the rough patch, and now's I don't know. But for me, I'm an activist, and I want to be on the ground doing things, pushing the limits, and that's where I want to be. That's where I feel I need to be. So I'm incredibly grateful of all of you. Incredibly grateful of Julie for doing everything she's done, and giving me the opportunity to step up there. But yeah, I'll leave it there.
You stepped into a really challenging role to be there, holding the space for tangata whenua in the region, connecting with all of our local iwi, helping them to negotiate this crazy thing that we've been making together, and doing it all with 4 kids. And I've been hugely grateful for the way you have championed bringing the gift of Te Māori to us, and highlighting our responsibility to accept it and uphold it. So thank you very much for doing that, and on behalf of all the forum. And we just wanted to say that we think you're a bit like this talker, that we know you're growing tall and strong and sheltering everyone else. Thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. So I wasn't sure if it was the right time, but I'm up. So if everyone's standing up at the back, if you feel the need to take a seat, feel free. But we're going to invite the science research group up here. Tonight our focus is on the biodiversity ecology. But our science and research group are going to do a presentation to kick it off. And following that, we'll have our biodiversity and ecosystems. Following that, so that should be cool. But
maybe while we get our tech just going, I'll share a bit more about the rest of the day. We've got the next 20 minutes or so hearing from our marvellous research team, followed by a little presentation from our ecosystem and biodiversity subgroup about their strategy, and then a lot of thinking about that. You'll be invited to decide whether or not you would like to think about the strategy they've produced, or whether you would like to think more about the functioning of the forum and how it's evolving into this next stage. So while you're thinking about this beautiful presentation, think about that.
Can we ask questions about?
Yeah, there will be.
Could you give me a hand passing the slides?
Yes.
I'll tell you. I'll let you know.
Sure.
Thank you, guys. I just want to say hi. I'm Sophia. I'm part of the Science Research, Technology and Research Group. I'm a newcomer here. I'm a guest, so it's been amazing how welcoming the forum has been to me, and how I've been able to get a community in this crazy time. Someone from a far land. This has been really important, and the STAR group, you guys are my peeps. You're amazing. So we want to talk to you today about planetary boundaries. Sometimes you've heard of it, maybe you haven't, but you probably know what it is in the end. But really, I want to start the story about like 10,000 years ago. Because what happened 10,000 years ago is that the planet entered this state called the Holocene. And it doesn't matter if you haven't heard about it, but what it means is that since then, our temperatures have remained really stable and our tectonic activity really calm. We haven't had a lot of tectonic activity in geological terms. So that's good. That has been great for humanity. That meant that humanity could settle across the world. It could develop complex societies and technologically advanced societies. But of course, the irony is that all our increased human activity has meant that we've put a lot of pressure on the planet. And thankfully, there are a lot of systems working behind the scenes to keep things running smoothly around the planet. But we put so much pressure that we're disrupting that equilibrium, and we're threatening to sort of knock us out of that nice, comfortable, happy place that the planet has been in. So, Julie, one of the ways we've disrupted the planet, as you see in that graph, we put so much pressure, we've pumped so much carbon into the atmosphere that we are literally changing the temperature of the planet. But, and we've been focusing on not hitting that upper 450 parts per million limit, because we know that that is very threatening to life on the planet and to everything on the planet. But we've also figured out that there are many, many ways in which we've been sort of, there are many ways actually where we've been disrupting the Earth's natural systems. So this takes us to 2009. A group of scientists from Australia and Sweden mainly developed this model called planetary boundaries. These are the 9 systems that support everything that functions in this planet. And you'll recognize most of these names. It's not a coincidence that a lot of the groups in the forum are tailored to some of those groups, like freshwater and so on. That's because while we recognize that we've been chipping away our planet's ability to stabilize itself, we know that it's not just carbon. We know it's not just atmospheric carbon, it's each of these. And yeah, so they all have to be thought if we want to be truly sustainable. We have to be thinking about all of them. So each of these variables has a threshold. Below that level, we're on a safe, happy place. And all of these systems basically work to keep us stable. They kind of push towards the middle and keep us there. But they'll have a limit. And above that limit, then we risk those sort of famous tipping points. We risk tipping things into unknown state. So it's an unstable equilibrium. So all of these have to be accounted for. When one of these Earth systems goes out of its happy, comfortable zone, which is the green bit in the middle, it risks all of the others. It triggers feedback mechanisms. So when we think about sustainability, we need to think about all of them. And the model, what it does is try to define a safe operating space. That's the green circle. And if we're there, we're good. And as of 2015, which is the last time this model was updated, we've already flown past 4 of these boundaries. That's not great. We passed the biosphere integrity one, we passed climate change, we passed land system change, and we passed biochemical flows. So each of these boundaries we've crossed is a threat to the stability of the planet. And also it's important to note here that this is a global state of affairs. There will be regions that this looks very different. So for example, in New Zealand, we know that freshwater use at the global level, they define a threshold of like a yearly consumption of water that the planet can sustain. And they calculate that we're about 65% of that limit, so we're good. But we know that in this region, for example, there are already issues in terms of water quality and marine biodiversity, so aquatic biodiversity. So the scenario when we're talking about these variables can look quite different at the regional level. So let's look at biochemical flows. Yeah. In New Zealand, this is particularly important because we've been increasing our use of NPK fertilizers for both livestock and horticulture. And not only are these fertilizers a source of greenhouse gases themselves, but they also, when they flow, when they fall into fresh water, they affect marine diversity and so on. So the point I wanted to highlight here is that it's not just when we're dealing with fertilizers and when we're trying to manage them, we're not just trying to manage the biochemical flow, we're also affecting fresh water, we're also affecting the climate change boundary, and we're also talking about biosphere. So all of these are very interlinked. And now, yeah, can we move on to biosphere, the biodiversity, which is the star of the forum tonight? And it's a very hard thing to define. It's a very broad idea. It refers to every variety of life and diversity on the planet. So it spans from genetic diversity, which determines individual species, to communities, to ecosystems, of which we're a part of as humans. So it refers to all of these interactions, and these interactions at each level in a way store the knowledge we have learned as the ecosystem for millions of years about how to survive on the planet. So that knowledge is very important. According to the model, biosphere integrity and climate change are the two core boundaries, and everything revolves around them. They've been evolving for the life of the planet together around each other. And they're so important that they're pretty certain that tipping one of them out of their comfort zone is enough to take us out of the Holocene state. So there are two main components of biosphere integrity in this model. One is genetic diversity, which refers to the whole sum of all forms of life on the planet. And to an extent, there is a system, we know that there's a natural system of species extinction. Species going extinct isn't new and isn't necessarily human related. But we have dialed that up to 11. And the current rate of species extinction is something that hasn't been seen since the last mass extinction event. And the problem with that isn't just that we're missing some of these species that we'll never see in our lifetime. The other problem with that is that this pool, this variable pool of genetic material, is what makes the planet and the biosphere so able to adapt to changing circumstances. It's like a pool of potential. So when the circumstances change in the planet or in a local ecosystem, there is variability that can adapt to that, and we're losing it. The other half of biosphere integrity is functional diversity. And that refers more to how organisms play a role in keeping the Earth functioning smoothly by doing things like regulating ecosystem dynamics and nutrient balance. And this is hard to quantify, and it's hard to say exactly where the limits are. The best approximation they have is that they want to we should maintain 90% of biosphere integrity. And the only place that this has been, this index has been used is in Southern Africa, and we're at 84%, so not great. But biosphere integrity is the reason why, functional biodiversity, is the reason why this is so connected to all of the other planetary boundaries. So we could spend all of these things interact, and you could spend a lifetime, and people do spend a lifetime looking at these interactions. But we're not going to do that right now. But we know that, for example, ocean acidification has an effect on marine life. If you look at things like coral reef, okay, we get that ocean acidification, bad for coral reefs. But it goes so much further than that, because a threat to marine biodiversity also reduces the capacity of oceans to act as carbon sinks. So then we move on to climate change. Indirectly, it's affecting climate change because it's reducing the ability to store carbon. So it also reduces the safe boundary by which each of the other components can operate. And then, of course, we move on, while we're at it, to the big elephant in the room, which is climate change. And again, climate change and biodiversity are linked. And they present a unique risk to biodiversity on the planet. In New Zealand, we're already seeing effects of that. And climate change can affect biodiversity in two ways, direct and indirect effects. Direct impacts are likely going to be more in the long term. So things like how weather patterns changing can affect species. So for example, again, it's hard to predict, but in general terms, we suspect that species are going to move south and further higher in altitude. And this all can also have effects in things like earlier fruiting seasons and flowering seasons. And because there's a system of interdependent species that depend on each other, this can have a lot of knock-on effects down the ecosystem. But then we have indirect impacts, which in the shorter term are going to be more relevant. The effects of climate change through pretty much human activity. We have medium-term effects, and that is mainly things like predators, introduced predators, and stuff like that. So medium biological threats are basically how the climate is going to make worse existing pressures on the biosphere. So, for example, there's already anecdotal evidence of trappers finding possums and rabbits at higher and higher altitudes. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. We're not looking for. And then in the shorter term, in the more immediate term, human threats to climate change will exacerbate human threats to the environment in things like forestry. We know that forestry has tremendous potential to tackle climate change by storing carbon. But if it's done well, if it's not done well, it has also the potential to disrupt native species, to increase fire rates, and to change the water system. So those are the direct, the indirect ways in which climate change can put a lot of pressure on biodiversity. It's also an increased risk of disrupting fresh water if, for example, climate change makes us use more irrigation of water. So that's the sort of stuff that is going to cause us trouble. So I've gone through all the bad news. Can you? But I don't want to leave you there, because what I want you to know now is the potential that biodiversity has, the role it plays in helping us adapt and mitigate climate change. And there are a couple of examples that I wanted to touch on. So one of them is our native forests, or your native forests. We know that mature indigenous forests in New Zealand store 6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. And to put that in context, that's around 80 times your annual emissions. That's a lot. But the thing with native forests and forests in general is that they need to keep regenerating. While they're regenerating, they're storing carbon, they're absorbing carbon from the atmosphere. If they're sick, if they're dying, they stop becoming carbon sinks, and they instead start emitting. They start becoming sources of carbon themselves. And that is a problem because introduce herbivores into forests, that's exactly what they do, because they go especially for the new forest, which is the part that has the most potential for carbon storage. So there was an interesting report in Forest and Bird recently, which calculates that by removing these species from the forest, they could store, the forest could sequester an additional 8 megatons of carbon per year. Again, in context, that means that reducing the presence of these animals in the forest means that they could store 10% annually over annual emissions, which is very significant on top of all the other benefits that this move would have. And there's one more source of good hope, which is carbon sequestration by marine wetlands, coastal vegetation, seagrasses, marshes, mangroves. This is all called blue carbon. This is the ability of coastal ocean ecosystems to store CO2. And I hope the biodiversity group might talk a little bit more about that. But these systems could have the potential, at least, of storing carbon almost 100 times faster than terrestrial forests. They're a huge deal. They have huge potential in carbon mitigation. So protecting these lands, which often don't get enough attention, so activity to protect these lands, like in the Waimea Inlet, has the potential to play a big part in New Zealand's capacity to adapt to climate change and play a role in a more sustainable and just future. So I hope that gave you a little bit of hope. Thank you very much. If I could invite the key folks from the Ecosystems and Biodiversity Group up to help answer some questions that you guys might have on these questions.
That's the idea.
Chris, would you like to do the facilitating of the questions?
Yeah,
that'd be great.
Okay, right. Well, thanks very much, Sophia. That was excellent.
Chris helped me, by the way, and it was very good.
Oh, Fiona, will you come up as well? Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
How low would the diversity? What percentage has got to go down from 100%? Talk about Sub-Sahara being 85%. Is that correct?
Yeah, 84.
84%. So what's the sort of tipping point for that?
So we should be above 90, but it's already below. It's already on the wrong direction. The other, nobody has a lot of hope that it's better anywhere else, but the results
my name's Lindsay. I'm interested in the blue carbon, and especially there's also talk about the sequestration capability of kelp fields and things like that. I'm interested in the long-term thing, whether, okay, that builds up at, I think you said 10 times the speed of trees and so on. But then when it reaches maturity, what happens? Does that level off, or does that disappear into the mud and get stored and then another lot come on?
Yeah, no, I'm not a technical expert on blue carbon, so I can't answer that. Fiona might be able to.
My partial answer to that is that one of the good things about blue carbon and ocean ecosystems, and you guys feel free to correct me because I've been learning a lot recently, is that as opposed to terrestrial, what marine vegetation and now microalgae is also a huge factor of that. What they often do is once they absorb it, a lot of it comes back into the soil and it sinks to the bottom of the ocean as organic matter. So a lot of one of the reasons why it's good and maybe better in some cases as terrestrial is because it has less potential just immediately burning and coming back out. It often ends up sinking to the bottom of the ocean.
And can I add to that? To know a little bit of the key of blue carbon is the anaerobic storage of carbon. And so once you start getting it buried, it's buried permanently. It's the creation of heat and creation of cold. And so what you're doing is you're taking it out of the system. It's as good as limestone or as coral does, but it's quite a fast way of.
I was hoping for that answer. Thank you.
Yeah. So then it does mean that you have to leave it, you have to let it stay anaerobic. There's certain places that happen, like today I was just looking at the estuary out there looking for places where it would be good that we could revegetate with sedges and what else could we do? So those are the questions that are going to be chewed over on that workshop on the 2 days.
Thank you.
Yeah, why don't you carry on?
Should I go to? I'm Scott. The question I've got is, we've taken the possums off our 40 hectares of forest, and the regeneration is massive. The broadleafs that are coming in are stupendous, and so you can really tell that storing carbon. Is there any progress on getting that recognised as carbon storage for carbon credits and things like that?
I mean, it's not, but that's a good question, and that's one of the reasons why sorry, I'm Debs Martin. I work with Forest and Bird, so that was one of the reasons why we've been looking at that research and that's just quite recently out about how much carbon is increased by removing pest species. And so obviously the next question from that is to think about, could it be used for credits? I mean, I also have this other thing that I call it the revolutionary carbon that never gets accounted for and just helps the system rather than getting traded off. That's always my worry about carbon credits.
Yeah.
I was reading recently about a method called sorry, my brain is not good. Microforestry, which is based on a Japanese approach, which claims that in a very small area, if you plant in a certain way with a certain diversity, you can sequester far more carbon than a much larger area where the trees are more widely spaced. I don't know if anyone of you can give us more information about this, because they're promoting it as a method of filling up empty spaces, waste spaces around with very, very carbon sequestering tree groups, and whether we can do this here, or whether people can be encouraged to do it here.
I guess my only comment on that is that the microbial biomass in soils does have a lot of potential to sequester carbon, and it's possible that by choosing particular groups of plants, then you're enhancing that microbial biomass. But yeah, I don't know any more than that.
I just wondered if it has some mileage to be more publicized.
Can you let us have the source of the information?
Yeah, sure.
That would be helpful. Right. Okay, I think from Julie we need to, sorry, yeah, one final.
That is a big question. That is a very big discussion at the moment. Different trees have different abilities to store carbon and different timelines in which to store that carbon. So there are types of forests that you can grow quickly and will suck up a lot of carbon quickly. Once they mature, they store it, but then they're not really holding. And the science is iffy on it. But basically, there are trees that are better at doing it quickly and mature early, and the native forests tend to be slower, but our forests have been for a long time. I think the approach that most people are going for is that you need both, because you do need a climate. You have a climate change from here, and you have a climate change from here. Within 50 years, it's going to happen. So, to an extent, you always need to be balancing that, and it will depend a lot on the terrain, and some terrains are better for some. So inherently, it's okay. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, but it is very dependent, and then there are other issues of whether you should have. But as a carbon strategy, a mixed approach is.
But sequestration is one aspect of it,
Yeah,
right? The whole ecosystem, biodiversity of natives is going to be a lot richer than Debs, if you want to comment on that.
Well, I was just going to say, they talk about the right tree in the right place, and I just pick up on what you're saying. Absolutely, I think what we have to do to address the climate problem is to sequester carbon fast, but we also need to think about what you also presented, which is about our biological integrity of our planet, and also our responsibilities to species that are going extinct. So, in New Zealand we have 4,000 species on the threatened species list. So our solutions, we have to be really careful. I mean, you may have seen there's been arguments or discussions recently about why people removing wildings in one place and then planting pines in the other, and that's the discussion about the right tree being in the right place at the right time. But I definitely think there are better that it's moving from a monoculture of forestry to something that's more integrated in the longer term. And obviously there'll be places where organisations like ourselves and others are going to be saying, but we need these places in pure native forest as well, because we've lost those ecosystems. On the in the Motueka Ecological District, which is basically these kind of front country plains, we're down to 0.35% left of our original forest cover. So less than 1%, less than 0.5% of our original forest cover. So it's an ecosystem that needs to restore.
Okay, so we call this.
Thank you so much for your presentation, for your questions, and for those very informative answers.
Okay, right, so now what I'm going to do on behalf of the Ecosystem Biodiversity Subgroup is just run very quickly through what we've come up with as a strategy in this area. As Gillian Bishop said in her sort of introduction, we've had several meetings over this. We've had probably about a dozen people, and people who are representative of a lot of the community groups here, sort of Gillian Bishop and others from Tasman Environment Trust, Debs Martin from Forest and Bird, and also Tawehi has been very active involved in this group. So we've had the perspective of Te Maori integrated into our work as well. Jo Gould from DOG, yeah, I don't think she's here today, but yeah, she's been critical in many areas. So So it's a lot of expertise has come together into this, and what we try to do. So what I understand, the strategy is up on the walls outside, right? So I'm not going to present it in great detail now. I'll just give you some of the sort of overview of it and the highlights, if you like. And then I think there's going to be an opportunity to do more sort of detailed discussion around the points where you'll see the whole strategy up there.
You want questions as we go along?
I think probably go through it now.
We're going to save questions. I'll talk to you about questions at the end. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. So I'll just give a very quick overview now. And again, I've got it down to about 5 slides, I think, and I'm not going to read the content of this. You can read it for yourselves, and you'll see that I don't on the wall, but I just talk very briefly to it. Okay. Next slide.
Oh my goodness. I will when I figure out how.
That's it?
Oh, good. Didn't do anything. Okay.
Okay. So we've got a sort of vision here about of biodiversity ecosystems being resilient. So this is the sort of the resilience in terms of species, in terms of the genetic diversity of the species as well. In the face of climate change, and being a part of the solutions, as Sophia said in her talk. So looking at both sides of it, and the source of all life, right? So we're taking this to mean not just land, but ocean, sea as well. So taking a very broad coverage, if you like, of this as an integral part of land and sea. Because healthy ecosystems fundamental to the well-being of all life on Earth, including ourselves. So again, from the sort of Maori perspective of healthy people, healthy planet, or healthy planet, healthy people, to go together. And so our ecosystems are a part of keeping ourselves healthy. So yeah, so we're of the Earth, Te Tau, health and well-being is deeply connected with the health of our Earth and all its systems. So what we envision is Tasman, Nelson Tasman region, where we're all different sectors and groups recognize the value of our ecosystems, and our responsibility as Katiaki, as guardians and stewards of this. So we have a role to play, and so how can we best play this role here within the region? And that leads us then next to some principles that we've come to. We've got a few principles. It's funny.
Turns out that screen sharing
there, but not up on here.
And this.
We just should.
There we are.
There we
Yeah.
go.
Okay. I'm not going to read all these out. Just take the 1, 2, 3, 4. The fifth one. Sort of combine good science. So sort of what Sophia was talking about, the Western scientific perspective with Mataranga Maori as well. So there's a lot of value in the perspectives and the rich traditions of Maori that can come together, and how can we put these together to build on our actions around, and also try and prioritize actions that make the greatest difference to the desired outcome. So what's the best bang for our buck? Okay, next one. So as well for that, we've identified, gone to a lot of work to identify 4 different work streams for our group. And each of these, you'll see as in the full document that's up on the walls there, there's a lot of bullet points under each work stream. So I'm not presenting any of those here, but just to sort of highlight what the 4 are. One is around sort of prioritization. What's the most important things that we do, the locations, the ecosystems, the species that are most vulnerable to climate change in our region, and what actions can we most effectively and efficiently do to enhance their resilience over time. So this is a prioritization. We've only got a limited amount of effort and resources to bear. So where can we get the most
impact from deploying those. The second one is about providing input to the development of relevant sort of laws, the strategies, plans and regulations. So this is sort of inputs to council, to national government, even to other bodies. DOC for example, could be as well, at quite a high level, to make some input there that's relevant to the Tasman, Nelson Tasman region. The third one is action. So what can we do to add value to the community actions that are already ongoing? Say there's a lot happening here already, the Waimea Inlet Trust over in Golden Bay, around Nelson, obviously. So it's not a question of duplicating that, but what can we do to add value to it? And the fourth one is acting as a watchdog on the plans and actions of council, private sector, other national or regional organisations and so on, to see what's going on in terms of developments, and are there any things that we need to make sure that we're acting as a watchdog there to bring to the attention of people when there's when climate change isn't being taken into account. Okay. And some challenges that we've identified as well, where the existing sort of planning laws, legal framework doesn't take climate change into account. Conflicts between biodiversity, resilience and productive land use, for instance. Vested interests around urban expansion and land development. And a very important one, lack of public awareness and engagement, especially over the urgency of climate change. And this isn't something that's specific to our subgroup, but I think it's a forum-wide issue. And so we're very pleased that we have a sort of communications group, and that's sort of one area for discussion today, I think, is highlighting that urgency. And as you see there, forestry, native versus exotic. So that's, we've already discussed that a little bit today. Okay, I think that's it.
You can probably tell just from that quick view that we've got some incredible people working on this ecosystem and biodiversity strategy. But nonetheless, they are not everybody in the forum. They do not have everybody's perspective. So it's really important that we get a diverse view going into this strategic planning. So that's aim number one of today for me. I guess I've got two. But aim number one would be making sure that this strategy gets feedback from all of the other subgroups and from a wide range of people here. So this is what I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose, first of all, that the people who came up and spoke to you on behalf of their subgroups, or someone they choose to shoulder tap, make themselves one group out there in the foyer in a moment, and they have a job to look through and answer the green question on there, which is about identifying any gaps, anything that they disagree with. That's printed up there, but they also have another task, which is to look at it from the perspective of their subgroup. Identify any crossovers, any opportunities to collaborate, and any areas where their thinking in their subgroup is in conflict with what they're reading in the strategy. So a way for the subgroups to come together now, here today, and discuss this strategy from the perspective of all the other subgroups to begin to integrate this work together. Does any of those people object to that? Yay, that's really exciting. Because one thing, oh, Debs, yes, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, in our strategy, because you all read it, you'll notice that we actually identified areas that we thought linked with other subgroups as well. So it might be good to fact check that part of the strategy.
Thank you, and I've printed off that list for back there. So that will be a portion of you. There'll be another portion of you that love strategy and or love ecosystems and biodiversity, but haven't really fed into this group because you've been busy doing other stuff in other groups. So if that's you, could you please raise your hand? If you think that you are a strategic thinker, you like wordsmithing, you think written strategy is important, or you've done a lot of thinking about ecosystems and biodiversity and what we should be doing about it in the context of climate change. Raise your hand once more if that's you. I just want to see how many of you are. Raise it really high. All right. Okay. So maybe you could be another group then, out there in the foyer, and your role will be to answer that same question that's written in green on the strategy out there, and also to answer another question, which is about clarity. Is this strategy clear to you how it's going to achieve its purpose? That's a very broad question. So what I'm going to ask is that Chris and someone else from your subgroup, who you can choose in a moment, join those two groups, one in each group, to answer questions that those people in those groups have. So this is a way for us to come together to help develop that strategy. The rest of you who didn't put your hands up, who aren't maybe so keen on strategic thinking, but are interested in other parts of the forum, I'm going to invite you to stay in here and do some small group work on some other questions that the ecosystems and biodiversity subgroup came up with that aren't necessarily specific to their strategy, but are more about how the subgroups work, about how the forum works, how it communicates, how it works together, and what we can do about community engagement, keeping people engaged with the work of the forum, that kind of thing. So if you didn't put your hand up so far, then stay in here and we will organise. Does that all make sense? Anybody have any questions so far? Kate. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. The biodiversity strategy of Nelson, the top of the South strategy, the two councils, iwi and DOC. The problem with it is that the Tasman biodiversity strategy is still in development, so we haven't been able to take that into account. But that's obviously pending.
And I'm on that group.
Yeah.
Right. So we're just looking for alignment.
Yeah, we've sort of taken that into account.
Got it. Thank you. So this piece of work here, dealing with the strategy out in the forum and those two separate groups, there's actually 3 versions of the strategy printed up, but I think 2 groups looks like it'll be enough. Feel free to change that if you want once you're out. And the other groups discussing in here, we'll take that through for 45 minutes, so it's 7:30, and we'll all share some pie together and move on to the next part of the Hui. This Hui will finish at 8. All right, so if you are one of those people who is heading out, please head out now. Okay. So everybody is there. All right, are we ready? Good enough? If you're sneaking out, please sneak out quietly so we can get ourselves organised. Thank you. Okay, so everybody that's in here, we've got 6 tables around the room here. And on those 6 tables are 3 questions. Greg and Marina. So we've got 6 questions, 3 questions, twice over, on these 6 tables around the room. And so it looks like we've got maybe 4 or so people to a group, which is a lovely number, to make your way to one of these tables. So over here we've got question numbers 2, 3 and 4. And over here we've got question numbers 2, 3 and 4. And the job of your small group will be to spend 15 minutes or so just discussing each question. So would you like me to read them out? Would that be helpful? Question 2. How can each subgroup best interact with other subgroups? Combining efforts will produce more impact for our collective resources, time and energy.
So yeah, how can our group and the forum as a whole better communicate with our wider community across the region about the urgency of the situation and the need for action to effect change?
And question number 4 is the air, water and soil subgroups were created alongside this one to ensure the manner of our natural world is prioritised by the forum, but have recently folded due to lack of interest. The ecosystems and biodiversity subgroup is the only remaining subgroup in this manner of cluster. We have not yet incorporated the air, water and soil perspective into our strategic action plan. What is the best way forward for these important topics? And how can the forum engage more people in its subgroups? There's lots of interesting food for thought, and we just love your input, really. So there's pens on each table. If you can make your way to one table, and then I will ask somebody from each subgroup, you can choose somebody from each group that you're sitting in, to move around the group and take the paper with you when it's time. I'll let you know. So a new paper will come to you with a new person holding it, who can answer questions about why was that written there already, and what was the thinking behind this thing, and actually what does that word say because it's been scribbled. So the person who moves around with the paper is going to be kind of a spokesperson for the conversation that's gone before. Does that make sense? Yeah. So okay, if you can move your chair to your table, one of the
Julie, question. How different is this from the initial Hui that happened when James Shaw was there and all that? Because we did that, well, for those who attended it, we already did that subgrouping, and then this is what it came out, the whole subgrouping thing. So this is the same conversation, because I remember there was resilience, there was different strands of things.
Yes, thank you. I understand your question. So after the forum launch, when we had all those different topic-based discussions, one of those was ecosystems and biodiversity, and that discussion has continued through that time until now, and we're just seeing the draft strategy come out of that. And so that's where that topic has got to. These questions are more about how we want the forum to function. How do we want to bring people together? How do we want to communicate with the community? And so it's much more, less of a topic-based discussion, more of a process-based one. Yeah?
And in terms of missing groups, transport seems to me like a really important missing group.
Yes, we didn't have a speaker from transport or energy in the room today. Thank you. I'll make sure that gets followed up. Appreciate that with the folks.
We're doing very general things, aren't we?
Yeah, general. How should the forum best be effective is the overall question, and these are the focuses that you've been asked for from that group today.
Okay, a couple of observations. One is I like what's been done on the strategy so far, but I can never have a document without wanting to change it, but I'll do that again. The thing I like is rather than getting heavily into strategy, I think what we actually need are action plans.
Yeah.
Because strategies get parked on shelves, no reason, and then 10 years later someone writes another one. Action plans. And the other thing I've been thinking, looking at the biodiversity and restoration people around the district are very successful. And that's because they're doing things on the ground. They've got trapping, planting, things like that. So it's for us finding, for me, more important than the actual planning strategy, is what's an action plan, and how do we develop the sort of teams and the activity type things. What can we learn from them because they're doing it well? And it's hard to find some of this because the mitigation, for them, they're doing something, they're achieving something. A lot of mitigation is what actually stops doing stuff. And that's hard. But I just think, what can we learn from them so that we can connect more successful?
Great, thanks. So that might fit really well with question 4 about how do we engage people and keep people engaged. Yeah, thanks.
It's actually our next meeting is having got the start with the actions.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So that, I mean, the strategies contain work streams with actions within them. If you want to have a look at what the ecosystem and biodiversity action plan is, it's within those work streams that you've just seen.
I read the thing from end to end.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. Please make your way to a table and enjoy having a quick chat about each of those questions. Well, we'll call it 10 minutes for each one now.
And just a reminder to everybody, if you look at point 3, vested interest, if you want to have more stake, then in a paper form that you support the local board. Because without any representation like that, we can talk until we are blue. Have me.
We get all the questions, Joe. We do get all of them. One of the reasons why
They want to be. They want to use
Have you done the shuffle yet? I'm going to get to food.
Alright, is anyone still here? They've all gone. Righto. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, yeah, it's me. Yeah.